Hey.
Hello.
Hey, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to be here today, talking about a whole bunch of stuff related to content marketing, and all of that. So, super excited to have you as a guest. For anyone who is tuning in, also welcome. Super happy that you're here. If you're watching on AirMeet, and you have any questions about content marketing as a career, drop it in the chat or the Q&A. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, drop it in the comments because I know that Lindsay would love to answer any questions that you guys have. So just a few introductions. If you're watching and you don't know me or you haven't seen me before on a live stream, my name is Adriana. I'm the community manager at RevGenius, which is a totally free community for tech professionals in sales, marketing, RevOps, and success. So if you're not already a member, go to RevGenius.com for more. It's totally free to sign up. And then we have Lindsay, who is the content marketing manager at FormStack. So I would love to hear a little bit more about you, Lindsay. I will let you introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. As she said, I am the content marketing manager at FormStack. We are our workplace productivity platform that includes online forms, document generation, and e-signature. We also have a native Salesforce app, so I actually know a lot about Salesforce as well. Be a little dangerous in there. As far as myself, I host the Practically Genius podcast for FormStack, produced it across all 6 of our seasons, and have hosted the last 2. I also handle our long form research. Our most recent report was the state of digital maturity, which we actually based our entire season 5 of our podcast on, which was really fun. Previously, before FormStack, I have a background in nonprofit and in financial services, but I've always been a content marketer through and through.
That is awesome. So I do just kind of want to start out like diving into your career path a little bit. So you started out wanting to be in journalism. Tell us about that. How did you end up here?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I did start in journalism. I have a degree in journalism. I originally thought I wanted to be a news broadcaster, and I joke nowadays it's kind of come full circle because I feel like the podcaster is the modern day news broadcaster. But yes, I went to University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. MIZ, if anyone familiar. But I started out in broadcast journalism and then kind of realized I didn't want to be waking up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to do the morning news. Just wasn't
Very
my
fair.
not my cup of tea. So I was trying to figure out, I knew I was a strong writer. I knew I loved to write, and not to date myself and age myself, I guess, but I went to college starting in 2009. So the economy is crap. The world is kind of crap. And I'm trying to figure out, well, I know that I really do enjoy journalism. Maybe broadcast isn't the realm for
Mhm.
me, but what else within here can I do? I
Yeah.
originally wanted to double major in business and journalism. They told me I couldn't with how the credits work. So I had to pick one, pick journalism. And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to switch to strategic communication because that seems the most versatile of a degree out of all the J school focuses.
Mhm.
And at the time decided that that would be my major focus, and then on the side I would freelance. And so I did a lot of freelancing in magazines, like printed physical magazines, which is kind of crazy to think about now because not a lot of them really exist anymore,
Mhm.
and did like digital marketing. And so did that for about 5 years, graduated with a degree in strategic communication, and then got to a point where I was like, you know what, I just don't want to be in this freelance game anymore. It's just kind of exhausting to never know, like, what's my paycheck going to be next month? And I'm much more of a type A person, so decided to go in-house. And my first role was actually with the largest credit union in Alabama called Redstone Federal Credit Union. Came in as their digital content specialist, I think was my title. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but something kind of long. Essentially, content marketer. I helped launch their blog. I did all of their social media, handled their email nurtures and campaigns. And I also ran, one fun thing I did there was I ran a 9-month giveaway campaign where the final part of it, I gave away a check for $65,000. So it was really fun.
Wow. That is cool.
Yeah, and then when my husband had to relocate to Indianapolis for his job. Obviously couldn't keep working for the credit union. They don't offer much remote work in the credit union world. So I kind of, the magic of social media, I put out a post saying, hey, I'm moving to Indianapolis area. I'm interested in content marketing, either in financial services or nonprofit. Someone at United Way magically saw my post. And I mean, I knew no one in Indianapolis. So that's another like career thing, like the power of social media. Knew
Mhm.
not a like half brother of a sister of a cousin once removed or anything. Someone saw the post and they reached out to me, said, I think we have the perfect role for you. Was there almost 2 years. But when I started looking at Indianapolis before we moved, I realized like the tech hub that's here, and there's just
Mhm.
so much tech and people don't know about that. It's kind of like an undercover, like, there's a underground hub of tech.
Mhm.
And I knew eventually like I wanted to go there and that was where I needed to be. And luckily a role did open up in FormStack that kind of matched my background, my experience. And I think what gave me the leg up is I had used FormStack in both of my previous roles.
Yeah, for sure. That does help a ton, and I noticed that in my own job search when I was trying to get into tech, so I love that you mentioned that. Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, the differences between working on content in the B2C world versus transitioning to B2B? Like, is there a difference in terms of, like, what companies look for as far as experience or skills? Like, let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the gap is lessening, definitely. I think B2B has realized they need to be much more like B2C because regardless, you're selling to humans in either way. Like you are still talking to people, whether it's in, their personal life or their professional life, quote
Mhm.
unquote. But I think it really depends more on the industry, like the vertical that you're approaching. So it's not so much whether it's like B2B or B2C, like that's important, but I think it's more of the industry that that company is in. So whether that would be healthcare or
Mhm.
financial services, or, even like in the nonprofit world, segmenting between a nonprofit focused on animals, which would be very different than a nonprofit that focuses on human services. So to me, I think it's more important to think about the vertical industry that the company you're interested in working for is after, and being able to mold some of that into your resume, into
Mhm.
your dialogue when you're in interviews and conversations. I think there's still some discrepancies, big, large scale, between B2C and B2B. B2C is usually a much, much faster buying cycle, right? Like people are impulse
Mm,
buyers in
true,
B2C a
yeah.
lot. Not so much maybe in B2B. You might be
Yeah, I
working
don't think
on,
anyone's, like, drunk software shopping, on a Saturday
I mean,
night,
I don't know,
like
maybe, who knows? That's probably someone's like thing, I don't know.
yeah.
Um, but I think there's some big overarching kind of bigger things to keep in mind. But
Mhm,
as far as when you're thinking about applying to jobs and interviewing, I think it really comes down to who they are marketing to, who are they are talking to, and knowing that audience. And even if I mean, anyone who's a content marketer knows we're like the best like BSers of all time, right? Like generally speaking, you're not an expert in what you're writing about. You have to figure
mhm,
out how to come off as an expert. And
yeah,
so being able to do that research and figuring out just even like the slight tweaks of the audience names, what they might be interested in, things like that's important,
mm,
I think.
gotcha. So I do kind of wanna step back for a second, because I know you kind of talked a lot about, like, certain ways that you can kind of promote your own accomplishments. So can we kind of explore, like, one, how to do that on a resume, and then two, like, how to actually put yourself out there on a platform like LinkedIn to, like, make yourself more visible, to anyone that might be hiring? Like, what tips would you give people?
Yeah, as far as resumes, I would say always having hyperlinks in a resume. Like it's if you
Mm,
just put something there and it's not hyperlinked, like they're not going to go into Google and search for the title of that post or that podcast or XYZ, right? So make it easy, make sure there's a link there. Especially in cover letters, you can give more of the context too about those projects. So you can
mhm,
describe the value of that project or the revenue it brought in, or the number of customer accounts that were created off of XYZ. So painting the picture of the impact of what you've done. And it's hard as like a content marketer. Like it's still something I struggle with. And I work at a pretty sizable organization, but still it's hard sometimes to quantify the impact your work has done. But I think that is very important. Something that a lot of hiring managers will look for is not just like what you've done, but the impact of what you've done. And as far as showing that off, always having some kind of website, and that can even be your LinkedIn, where you can use that as your portfolio. LinkedIn has done a lot of growth in the last few years to give
Mm.
you possibilities to show off your items. You can have that carousel on the top where you can feature, I think, five or even more, I don't know, but at least five, I know for sure, pieces of your content, and have it front and center and accessible. But also, I'm like getting PTSD thinking about it. But always, always, always save your work once it's published, because I cannot tell
Mm.
you how many organizations I've worked for, whether freelance or in-house, that they've done some kind of crazy website overhaul, and now all of my previously beautiful blog posts and content marketing pieces look like trash.
Oh no.
Or another horror story, they will do the migration, and then all of their posts will set to one author. So even though I wrote all these posts for this one organization, now it's under someone completely different's name. So
Yeah.
always, always, always save your work once it's published. There are lots of just easy screen capture, Chrome extensions you can get that make it super easy. I literally take time every week and screenshot everything that's gone live that I need to have access to. And then as far as showing off your work, doing that first and foremost, so you have kind of your depository that will not change and is beautiful and legitimate and has your name on everything. But then figuring out, well, do I want to have a portfolio site? Do I want to lean hard into LinkedIn? How do I want to present these things? Of course, if they're still living and live and look great, of course, the links and going to the actual live content is great. And
Mm.
even using them within, if you're doing any video work, bringing them up and highlighting them that way. Of course, sharing them is an obvious one, but
So, okay, so let's say someone is watching this and they're like, oh shit, okay, I've been working in a content marketing role. I may be getting ready to job search, or I suspect my company might be doing layoffs,
oh, don't say it.
something, but they're just kind of, I'm not going to jinx anyone, okay? But, knock on wood. But, it is just kind of the reality of the job market right
It
now, I
is. It
think.
is.
But whichever way, someone's sort of getting ready to at least start looking around for jobs, and they're like, okay, crap, I haven't really been saving anything, I haven't really been recording my numbers, what are some things besides the screenshotting and kind of creating a backlog of the work that you've done, are there metrics that people should be keeping track of, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really depends on the content you're creating and the purpose of that content.
Mm.
But to make it kind of simple and easy off the top kind of things, for instance, for our podcast, that's really a brand piece for us, right? We don't
Mhm.
use our podcast as a revenue generator. Yes, it's great when those opportunities happen, but that's not the goal of our podcast. It's really a brand play,
Mhm.
getting our message, our brand out there, getting in front of experts, having great, strong conversations to fuel our content across our organization. And so I wouldn't necessarily look for revenue numbers that were correlated to
Yeah.
the podcast, right? No one's attributing Practically Genius to a closed sale. Cool if they are, cool, hell, tell me,
Mhm.
but but that's not the purpose. But in that instance, then it's looking at downloads. How many downloads have we had? How many are we averaging per episode, per season? Is that growing? Have we seen, an uptick over time? And what is that percentage year over year or month over month, or however you want to break it down? And then as far as the quality of the content, looking into metrics like how long people are listening to each episode and identifying that. And if you can average that and it's high, that's a great stat to have, because it means you're producing really excellent content. And then
Mhm.
another one, this one's kind of hit or miss, but if you do have a lot of reviews sometimes can be a signal of success, right?
Yeah.
But for B2B podcast, reviews are not really a big thing. So, not most people are yeah, I'm going to go review this B2B podcast right now.
Best
um,
ever. I love talking about lead generation.
oh, lead generation, yeah. But then if you're going to go and talk about some kind of report or something like that,
Mhm.
then that is a moment where you are more likely to
Mhm.
then be oh, what campaigns was this a part of? What is the ops that were open from this? What's the revenue generated? What's the close
Gotcha.
rate? Things like that. So it depends on the piece of content you're highlighting, depends on the goals of that piece of content. And it'll vary and it'll change and it'll adjust.
Mhm.
And making sure you're not trying to highlight too many things all at once, right? Like focus, especially on like a resume, 3 to 5 bullets max, right? Like for
Yeah.
at least each job and role and things like
Mhm.
that.
Awesome. Okay. So let's say, someone has all of their accomplishments lined up, but they're sort of looking around like, maybe I haven't been super active on LinkedIn. Maybe I live in a really small area. I don't really have a lot of people like local to me. So I really do need to focus more on like growing a community and my network online. Like, where should people start besides just posting on LinkedIn?
Yes, I would say, the generic answer, do a Google search. No, but yes, do a Google search in whatever either industry you're in or vertical you're in or role you're in. Putting that in and putting in community or group or networking or things like that. And then if you're looking for something regionally or local, then add in those keywords too,
Mhm.
Midwest or Indianapolis or Indiana or whatever it might be. And then that's an easy way to start kind of a list and being able to gather some information. But also, like, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends. Like, if you have other people at other organizations or even within your own organization, I could talk to my product marketing managers and ask what are they involved in, what groups are they active in. I could ask my manager or my manager's manager or even like our SVP of marketing. Talking to your coworkers is where they're active, and that's not a signal like to, I mean, some people might
Yeah.
think that's a signal, but I mean, if anything, it'll just signal that you're interested in your own growth and your own
Mhm.
professional development, and that's an asset to an organization.
For sure.
But I would say, yeah, talk to your coworkers, talk to your friends, do a Google search, and then like listen to industry focused podcasts, whether it's for your role or your industry or your vertical, whatever it is. But a lot of those will bring up organizations or groups that might be helpful. So, for instance, for me, like Superpath has been a really helpful one for me. I'm also in a group called Together Digital, which is focused on women who work in digital roles, specifically, mostly in marketing. And things like that have been so powerful for me and have really introduced me to people I would probably never ever meet like
Yeah.
organically or naturally. And being able to have those spaces to build relationships. And essentially, you can also use those places to like hunt down people in the orgs you want to be at and kind of build
Mhm.
bridges before you need them, which is super helpful.
Definitely. Awesome. Okay, so I do kind of want to dive into more of the like skills needed for if you're looking for a new role. So if someone is maybe outside of content creation, let's start there first. They don't really have specific experience. Maybe they are really passionate about creating content. They've been posting on LinkedIn, they've been writing articles, but it's not really a part of their full time role. Like, where can they start with really making sure that they have the skills that they need to actually get hired somewhere?
I mean, what you just said is really like a great foundational start. Putting in the work. That really is like step number one, no matter how it is, whether it's a personal blog you spin up about, let's say you like to knit, like make up a blog that's about knitting, and
Mhm.
that's a way that you can hone your skills and get better and have samples and show off what you can do and how creative you can be. But also finding organizations that might not be able to pay you for that work, but you can still add on your resume. One that I talk about a lot is I'm very passionate about community and philanthropic service. And so I'm always an advocate of if you're not in content marketing, it's something that's attractive for you, like
Mhm.
talk to a nonprofit you're passionate about and see if
Oh,
they need any
interesting.
help, like it's a win-win, right? Like they always are in need of help and support and like low cost help and support,
Mhm.
and you're trying to build a resume and build samples. And so it really is like a win win there. And that's always why I advocate for people who don't work in the industry or don't have a technical role that's content faced, but maybe you
Mhm.
want to get into content or you want to test it out, right? Like you want to know, like, is this something I want to do full time
Yeah.
or is this something I'll enjoy? So I definitely always advocate find an organization that you love that you could offer your services and they could take them. In that instance, you're probably not going to be making any money, but there's also too, you could maybe even look at, and these are paid, usually not a lot of money, but if there's a local magazine or a local kind of
Mhm.
digital magazine that's looking for freelancers, and the money's going to be very, very minuscule for the most part, but it's a great way to get a byline and to get published in
Mhm.
a legitimate source. And so I think those are some like good, easy entry points. And then as far as if you're already in content marketing and looking to skill up and level up, I mean, definitely certifications. I actually just had a friend who reached out who was asking, like, hey, like, I'm thinking I want to get more serious into content. Are there certifications to look into? One I know that's really good is HubSpot has a content marketing certification.
Hmm.
Marketing Profs always runs a bunch of different certifications, and they do
Mhm.
like a really great sale, I think maybe once a quarter. So always advocate for things like that too, so you can keep learning new skills and honing in on new things.
Definitely. So, if someone is already in a content marketing role, but let's say they want to move to more of like a senior position in management, something that's like more similar to what you do now, like what should they be doing as I'm not really super familiar with content marketing roles and like how the teams work. So
Mm-hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong because I'm sort of thinking about it as like, okay, like if you're in sales, you know, like you're an independent contributor and then you can move into like a management position. Like, so I guess if you're moving from like an independent content contributor into more of like this leadership position, like what can people do to kind of start preparing
Mm-hmm.
to apply to those roles?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times there's not a lot of like upward mobility for content teams. So really
Mm,
to grow in content, you do need to do some hopping around, and that's really a
mhm.
lot of how you'll do it. And some places are different. I have been promoted within FormStack, and so our culture is probably a little bit different, but in general, I would say really to be able to grow and keep expanding that, you either need to start and this is like relative to the tech world, you
Mhm.
either need to start at a startup that will have those growth opportunities as they grow and they mature and they get bigger and larger and more headcount, or you need to be looking, in 2 or 3 years, what's my next step at XYZ
Gotcha.
organization, and kind of hopping between organizations, because a lot of the times it's very flat, and like you'll get title promotions and maybe pay raises, but you won't necessarily maybe be going from an IC to managing a team or having a
Mhm.
person under you or something like that. One thing I would say that's very helpful if you are an IC and you want to get into management, which first and foremost, I will say that does not have to be your career path, right? Like you can be an individual contributor and be super successful and never have to manage anybody. Like if you don't want to manage people, like that is not a definition of success. I think that's one
Mhm.
thing we get stuck on is like,
For
unless you
sure.
manage people, like you're stalling your growth or you're not climbing the ladder. Like, no, I know plenty of people who are ICs who are incredibly talented and incredibly successful. But if that is something you want, and a lot of times you get stuck because your pay is tied to whether you're a manager or not, right? Like
Yeah.
people who manage people make more money is just the way of the world, generally speaking. And so I would say one really great thing to do is if you're an IC, you want to become a manager, ask if you can manage the freelancers who work for your organization, or ask if
Mm,
you can manage an agency you use for something, whether that's
mm,
PR or social media or something like that. Like that is a great way to add kind of like that management
mhm.
experience on your resume without being a manager. And another one, kind of going to my nonprofit comment earlier, that's another way to do that too, is if you join a nonprofit board and then you lead a committee for that nonprofit. I mean, I have gotten so much value and managerial skills from
Mhm.
leading different fundraising committees, different marketing committees for different nonprofits in Indianapolis and central Indiana. It's a great way to be able to build some of those skills and have some of that background experience without having to get it from your professional role. And
Yeah.
then when you're going to apply for a role like that, you can say, well, I haven't managed people in my, day-to-day 40-hour a week job, but I have managed people in XYZ.
Okay, that is awesome. I love how creative you are with some of these suggestions. Super cool to see. So, okay, let's say also, totally get that not everyone wants to manage people. It's super stressful. I get that. But okay, if someone is really passionate about content creation and content marketing, like what are some other roles that they can look into that might be similar or can really like appeal to people who really enjoy content creation and content marketing, but that's maybe not specifically like labeled content marketing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of roles are content roles. People just don't think about them that way, right? Like
Mhm.
you can be very, very creative as far as the content you're producing and sharing in a lot of different roles that do not have content in the name. For instance, like CSM, so like customer success managers, like
Mm,
they do so much content, right? Like they're emailing customers all the time, they're talking to
yeah,
customers all the time, they're in negotiations and renewals and onboarding and all these things. Like that's a ton of content right there. So think about, how can you get creative with your outreach sequences? How can you get better with the onboarding videos or demos that you're doing or any of the content you're inviting your customers and clients onto? I think that's one thing that resonates with me. Another thing is like being in sales, right? Like you are a content marketer when you're in sales. You might not know it, but you are.
for sure.
Because think about it again, right? You're talking to all these customers through, LinkedIn or outreach or sending videos through like Vidyard or something like that. And
Mhm.
that is all content. So
Yeah,
really to me, like there are so many, really the only roles that are not in my head in like thinking of who works in a content based place, the only roles I would say that are really not content are like our developers. And granted, like they are actually doing content, but it's in like a whole different like
yeah,
vibe realm, like, yeah. But I would say almost every role within a tech company, and I guess, well, devs and finance, a lot of finance roles
mm,
are not content, they're numbers, but
for sure. I am kind of curious to like hear your take on this because obviously, like we all know that like the sales and recruiting layoffs have been crazy. Like, have marketing teams seen the same thing? Is content kind of experiencing the same thing? I haven't really heard very much from that perspective.
yeah, it's been interesting. Definitely feeling it in marketing. I think we're a little probably delayed in the
Mm,
layoffs as many layoffs. I definitely know a lot of marketers who have been laid off and it
mm,
is happening. I don't think at the rate of sales teams. And I think there's a few things going into that, right? Like with COVID and the changes COVID brought, a lot of organizations didn't think about the long term after COVID, and
yeah,
so they made intense hiring choices in sales and then realized, we have all these salespeople and now like momentum is slowing. And yeah,
yeah.
so all that in there. But I think for marketers, what we're seeing is we're feeling the major budget cuts first, right? Like I think
Mm,
a lot of orgs from the conversations I'm having with colleagues in other organizations and just things I'm seeing out on the internet is I think marketing is more in a point of what is a necessity and what is not, cut the non necessities that are just good to haves or nice to
mm,
haves. Try to like retain that budget as much as you can as far as the
yeah,
things you have to have so that you can protect your people. But yes, the marketers are definitely being impacted by layoffs. And I think right now, a lot of us are wondering if we're next. And not saying that as a position of me at FormStack necessarily, but I think as a
yeah,
whole, a lot of marketers are seeing like, oh, okay, for sales, like is marketing next? So I think there's vibes of that out there for sure.
for sure. No, that definitely makes sense. I am kind of curious to know, like, for a lot of marketers that are in SaaS right now, like if there are continued layoffs, like do you expect to see a lot more people who are doing maybe like freelancing, or like starting their own companies, or more people like migrating out of SaaS?
Oh, that's a good question. I think first and foremost, and this is maybe a personal take, more of a personal take.
Yeah.
I think what we've seen the last year has really put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth with tech and people who have kind of like lived the high life in a way or have
Mhm.
felt like we're maybe very protected or insulated or whatever term you
Yeah.
want to use there. I think we're starting to realize like, oh no, like not as much.
Not so
Uh,
much. Yeah.
and what used to look really like butterflies and rainbows and growth and all these things we're
Mhm.
now seeing as like growth at all costs and the damage that has been done and some of
Yeah.
the like dark side of tech. So I definitely think we are going to see people migrating out of tech because they don't want to sit with that. They don't want to
Yeah.
have that weight. They don't want to have to wonder about like their integrity and the choices they're making, and that's a hard place to be. But I
Yeah.
definitely think that is coming. And then as far as like the freelancer question, it's kind of a rock and a hard place situation because
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of freedom in being a freelancer and there's a lot of opportunities there. But when you're facing a difficult market, it could be like, it's a flip of a coin, right? It's either
Yeah.
like organizations have cut their freelance budget and they are not hiring freelancers, or they are saving money by not hiring in-house and they are hiring
Mm,
freelancers. So I think there's like a net null right there. Like it's
yeah.
not high, it's not low. It's just kind of like in between.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think people are becoming, and I think this is a cultural thing of people are becoming less risk adverse to starting their own business and going all in on that and being an entrepreneur and starting,
Mhm.
whatever their dream is or their passion is. But yeah, I just think it's a weird time in tech right now in general.
For sure. No, I totally agree. I do appreciate you sharing. I'm always curious, like, just like what everyone's take is. It's like, especially like you mentioned, like this industry was so high for so long that it's definitely, yeah, things are a little rough right now.
Yeah, and it's hard, I think, for the people who have of like for myself and people who know
Mhm.
me very personally know I have a very like high moral compass and I
Yeah.
have very distinct um like in that not, what word am I looking for? Like integrity and like morals and values and things that guide the
Mhm.
choices and decisions I make. And
Yeah.
one trend I have seen on LinkedIn, which is worrisome, interesting, and scary, is a lot of people reflecting that same thing out and saying like, I have realized the org I'm working for does not align with these things.
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
even starting to see people who are leaving organizations because of this without another role lined up. And that
Yeah.
is like what shows you like the glaring issues in our industry of like, if you're bold enough to be like, you know what, this really is outside my North Star, outside my, morals, values,
Mm,
ethics, whatever you want to say, and you're leaving without having that next step. I mean, that's a bold statement. And it
yeah.
does worry me that that's coming, but hopefully we can readjust, learn from our
For sure.
mistakes.
Yeah. And I don't even think that's necessarily like an issue that's only related to tech because it's
Oh,
like,
no.
I mean, you could say the same thing for a lot of other industries, but I think it's just like getting so much more glaringly obvious now with everything that's going on that it's like, okay, if I am going to decide to work somewhere, like how much more should I be researching? How much more should I be thinking about these things when it's like we have all these questions about like who are we working for and what are they doing and, you know,
Oh, yeah,
what are
it's
their
definitely,
views on things, all of that.
yeah, it's definitely like a cultural movement across
Mhm.
millennials and Gen Z for sure. Like
Yeah,
we are the ones driving the you being accountable for who you are as an organization and the actions you
yeah,
take and what you're doing, and understanding that you don't just have to work for the man.
for sure. Alrighty, so sort of coming back full circle to more of the job search. What is like one main piece of advice that you would give someone who's currently job searching and is like worried about this job market, is a little bit freaked out by everything that's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, just know that everyone is feeling it. You're not alone. That is enough to like bring a little bit comfort, at least to myself.
Mhm.
Second, just talk to other people. Like find those groups like we talked about earlier where it can be a safe space to have those conversations and realize that other people are feeling these same things and going through the same things. And one thing I like about Together Digital is the fact that you can submit things anonymously. So if you have a question that
Mm,
you feel like, I don't necessarily want my name attached to this, but I still want to like have this
yeah.
conversation, there's lots of spaces that will allow for that in a productive and helpful way. And I think too, being able to tap into your trusted sources. People talk about having a personal board of directors, like knowing who
Yeah.
those people are, being open and transparent with them, and tapping into their resources and how they can support you, whether that's with opportunities or mock interviews or reviewing your resume or however their skill set can insert into like your job search and your job journey. And then once you're in it and you're trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to apply? What am I going to do? Like the best thing you can do is be able to network within those organizations that you see as like an ideal fit for you. Of course, if you're on like a very sped up job search, you can't quite do this as much. So this is more for those people who are kind of, I'm in an okay place, but I'm thinking about
Mhm.
next steps versus like I might have just lost my job and now I have
Yeah.
30 days to figure it out. Like more of a tip for the first example. But figuring out your list of ideal organizations, whether that is due to, the mission and vision they have, or the
Mhm.
audiences they serve, or the benefits they offer, or the culture they have, like figure out like a wish list of organizations and find people within those organizations that you can connect with, whether they are in a similar role to you or they are on the HR team and you just want to connect with them. Or for instance, at FormStack, I co-lead FormStack for Good, which is our social impact group. And that's one thing I've always been interested in. And could that potentially be a future career for me? And so what I've done is connect with people at other organizations within social impact and kind
Mm.
of running those groups
Yeah,
for if I were to decide that, oh, I want to move into that, I've built some of those connections and networks and I can tap into those too.
for sure. So in terms of like the biggest mistakes that you kind of see people making when they're looking for a content marketing role, talk to us about that. What should we not be doing?
Oh, yeah, this brings me back to some really funny stories. So we actually hired a copywriter, or we had a open role for a copywriter a few months ago on my team,
Mm.
and some people do wackadoo things on job applications, it's just crazy. It's so crazy. So if like for instance, Formstack puts our salaries like on the job listing, like what the
Nice.
range
Okay.
is, which is great.
Go
Like
form
all orgs
stack.
should do this
Yeah,
because it's stupid. Like I'm not going to look at a house if you don't tell me how much the house is.
for
Like
sure.
now I might be able to gather a little bit. Like, oh, I think this is but no, like just don't. Anyways, tangent over. But like we've had people who you'll see the salary range and they'll come in asking like an insane amount over. Like I get it, be confident, come in like
Mm,
hard, but like don't ask for like 50,000 more dollars than what's listed on the job rec. Like that's what? I don't know who's giving that advice, but please don't. Please don't. Another thing that's interesting, like I understand, there's room for improvement for everybody and there's always like thoughts and opinions, but like don't insult the team that you're going to interview with. Like we have just had whoa, yeah,
no,
just
yeah.
don't insult the people that you're trying to interview with. Like you're not going to get an interview that way. And it's one thing to offer like suggestions and ideas, like that
Yeah.
shows creativity, but yeah, we've had some real wonky things. I've heard other people too going through kind of the same experience when hiring. So just don't go that route. I would say too, just like not answering questions, like take your time, right? Like I think some people are trying to do so many job applications
Mm,
and I get it. Like it's a numbers game. It's a percentage possibility, right? Like probability. Like you got to do high volume because you're not going to convert on all more than likely. But sometimes it's just so easy to tell when people took like 5 minutes on an application. And
mm,
especially for a content job, like you can't snuff the answers on a job application. Or like,
yeah.
you can't just like give me like a crappy half done cover letter. Like this role is all about writing. And if you don't take the time to like do things, I mean, this is rudimentary, but I feel like so many people don't do it. Like spell check, like just spell check, like make sure like there are commas and periods, like things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and two, just taking your time reading questions and making sure you're answering the questions, especially for
Mhm.
organizations that in their application have very specific questions according to the role. So not like generic questions about like your
Yeah.
school or your background but like when you're asked really specific questions that are related to the job you're applying for, just make sure you actually answer it. Cause yeah, a lot of times I don't know. And it's not like we're asking hard questions. Like they're really easy questions.
Yeah, for sure. No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Um, so I am kind of interested to ask, like, generally speaking, not really limited to the job search, but like, what are your like controversial content marketing opinions? Like,
What do I have that's controversial? I don't know. Like, I'm not a super controversial person, I guess I would say. Like, pretty run of the mill. But I mean, I think one thing that has become clear in our industry is that content is encompassing of so much more than just written words on a page,
Mm,
right? So being sure that if you want to be in content, you want to be a content marketer, you're thinking in other facets versus just like
yeah.
text on a page. Um, and that's not very controversial, I guess. But man, what do I think that's like hot and fiery? I don't know. See, you think I'd have more because like I'm a redhead. This should be like my thing, right? It should be like fiery and spicy and um
Well, in
I
terms of,
oh go ahead.
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm still
No,
thinking,
I
so
was
go
just
ahead.
gonna ask, like, I guess just more about like the future of content marketing. Like, what really excites you about the space, especially like within B2B?
I think that we are just getting more creative, and I think we're taking a lot of the cuffs off that have been very quintessential B2B of, being
Hmm.
professional and buttoned up. And,
Yeah.
I think when you're in tech, you're in a little bit of a different of a space because you do have a lot more freedom and a lot more flexibility and creativity. What will be interesting, I think, is seeing how content marketers are still able to flex that creativity with a lot less resources and budget. I
Mm,
think that is going to be the caveat that we all have to get over in the next year, 2 years, who knows how long it will be, hopefully not long. But I think most of us are starting to see the budget cuts and dropping certain services or products or
mhm.
tools, things like that, and trying to figure out how you can still achieve quality and quantity without all those bells and whistles.
Yeah.
When you have a pared down budget or tech stack or whatever it might be, how can you still produce things that are amazing and will really resonate with people and leave an impression when you don't have as big of a budget as you might have a year or two ago? I think that will definitely be a challenge. And also trying to figure out how to bring growth to content is another fascinating one. We work in a realm where things seem just to be very stagnant as far as the roles and the
Mm,
jobs and the titles, and I would love to see more diversity there as far as
yeah.
in-house opportunities and being able to bring more options. And it's not just everyone has the title of content marketing manager, right? Like I think there's a lot of opportunity we could tap into, and it's exciting to think about where that could go. Oh, hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take, but my
Let's go.
hot take, okay, I will go there. Someone, for the love of God, make content ops a thing. Like, please, 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 please,
Oh,
please, please.
yeah.
Who can help me? Who wants to start a company about content ops? Because I'm here for it. I can't do it because that's not how my headspace works, but I see the need. Like that,
Yeah.
that will be my hot take because I cannot tell you, like, as a creative, it is
Mm,
so hard sometimes to get into those nitty gritty number details. And like any of
yeah.
you ask anyone at FormStack or even outside FormStack who knows me, Excel like scares the shit out of me. Like it's just not my jam. It's not my thing. It like literally
Same.
makes me panic just thinking
Mm,
about it. And we have such a heavy expectation of content marketers and
mhm.
especially even creatives who are the ones like actually creating this content to
Yeah.
be analytical and revenue focused and number focused and data and all these things. But sometimes it's just too much. And as much as I wish, like, yes, I can give you all these dashboards and details and numbers, like, that is not my strong skill set. And it will
Mhm.
never be a mind blowing skill set. I can do it,
Yeah.
but I probably won't do it exceptionally well. But if you gave me a partner, if you just gave me 20% of one ops person's time, whether it's
Mm,
marketing ops, rev ops, content ops, I don't know. Like
yeah.
I could just be just that much more successful, but
For
it just
sure.
doesn't happen. And that like, oh, if I could see that happen. Oh, someone reach out to me. Let's make content ops a thing. Let's go.
Definitely. No, I for sure. That's so interesting that you said that too, because I think that with the like focus on RevOps and obviously like sales operations has already kind of like made its way into the space. Like RevOps is really starting to at least like really get there. Like companies are more seeing the value in that. So I think it would be really interesting to see like how marketing operations, content operations kind of like evolve, because I think that especially like with companies realizing that like, okay, you know, we are overhiring with salespeople, maybe we're overhiring with marketing, like things like that, that it's like, what can we do to operate with a smaller team, but still have it be successful and not have our people that work for us hate our job, hate their jobs, you know, because they're having to update like 8 Excel sheets in one day, and this is not really what they signed up for.
This is
Um,
not the way.
yeah. And, you know, it's like when you make the people who hate Excel update the Excel spreadsheet, it's like something's going wrong. Something's getting broken
And
somewhere along the
it
way.
and it's just like, it's almost a physiological thing, right? Like, the way, the left-brained or right-brained type of
Mhm.
thing. Like, I am at my heart, and I have tried to, like, people have tried to push me in other directions. I've tried to push myself in other directions. Like,
Yeah.
I am through and through like a creative, and that's the way I think and I feel and I communicate. And yes, I can get into the data and I can tell you how things are doing and I can report out, but
Yeah.
it's never anything that I am going to be able to devote enough time to and
Yeah.
brain power and all those things. And if I could just have a little bit of support, a little support in that, like, oh my gosh, the things I like we could all achieve, right? Like, I bet there are so many content marketers watching this. They're like, oh, yes, yes. If I could just get like that little slice of heaven, just,
Yeah.
oh man, yeah,
Everyone's
I'll
adding
never.
it to their Christmas list right
Oh,
now, like a content operations person, please, Santa.
it was
Um,
literally on my wish list for 2023. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but it was
I'm
on there.
holding out hope for you, Lindsay. I think you can make it happen.
I appreciate that.
Well, all right, awesome. It has been super amazing having you on today. So appreciate you coming on the show. If people want to reach out, if they have a question about content marketing or their job search, where can they get in touch with you? Where can they learn more about FormStack if they're interested in that? Just tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, so I am most active over on LinkedIn. So just find me on LinkedIn, just search in Lindsay McGuire. Every millennial is probably like, oh, like Lizzie McGuire. Yes, like Lizzie McGuire, but it's spelled Lindsay, Lindsay. So, but yes, very active on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with anyone listening. I'm always happy to expand my network, whether you're a content marketer or not. I have a very diverse connection pool, so open to all. As far as formstack.com is our website. If you want to check out our podcast, it's called Practically Genius. You can listen to any streaming site, on our website, on YouTube, all the things. If you want to check out our most recent report, that was the state of digital maturity. It is a really fascinating report where we dove into research from 2,000 professionals to figure out what is holding people back from reaching digital maturity. Like, we're in
Hmm.
2022, like we did the report in 2022,
Hmm.
and we had all these expectations of the 2000s being so digitally advanced and all the
Yeah.
magic happening, but are we really there? Spoiler, no, nowhere
No.
close. Nowhere close. And it's making your employees miserable. So please check out the report, figure out, areas to improve and fix, because retention is important right now.
That is awesome. Well, thank you again. If you are watching, also, thank you for tuning into this episode. If you do want to learn more or join RevGenius, go to RevGenius.com. We would love to have you on our Slack, which has literally thousands of people from tech, including myself and Lindsay. So we would super love to see you on there, but we will see you next week. Thank you guys so much.
Bye, everyone.